and welcome to Bike File. This week on the show, Louise will be doing this, while Rod will be riding one of these. And in the meantime, I've flown to Bruntingthorpe Proving Ground in Leicestershire on the Bike File jet here, to ride this. Bring it on! Speed. It's a marvellous thing, and something you can pretty much never have too much of, as demonstrated very ably by this here ZX12. And speed is something that Kawasaki know all too much about, as we have seen from their domination of the top speed charts until the mid-90s with their ZZR 1100. At the time it did 178 genuine mile an hour and blitzed everything in sight. Unfortunately then the Blackbird came along and stole its crown, soon to be followed by the Hayabusa, the only motorcycle ever made that did a genuine 200 mile an hour in stock trim. But Kawasaki wanted back in on the action and they brought out this. Now unfortunately it never quite aced the Hayabusa, it was always a couple of miles shy of 200 mile an hour no matter where or how it was speed tested. So that's it, not the fastest bike ever made, but since all the adverse publicity that these 200 mile an hour attempts brought in the public press, manufacturers decided that they'd best not go for this top speed idea anymore. And as such, all bikes are now restricted by a gentleman's agreement between the Japanese manufacturers to 186 miles an hour or 298 kilometers an hour. So there you have it. This motorcycle will now do 186. No more, no matter how hard you try. But one, that is very fast, and two, the way this bike gets there has to be felt to be believed. But you can't just do 186 mile an hour anywhere, can you now? That tends to upset people a little bit. Yeah. So that's why we've come here to Bruntingthorpe Proving Ground in Leicestershire and their 2-mile runway just over there. Down that strip, we are going to cane the ZX12 to within an inch of its life and give it absolute merry hell. But just before we do, let's talk about what the bike's like when you're not quite doing Mach 3 down a disused one-way. Should you have a ZX12, there's one thing straight away you can do to make it better, and that is dig out the flathead screwdriver from the underseat toolkit and take out 1/2 turn of the compression damping of each fork leg, because as it comes from the factory, these are set a little hard, which means that if you're just pottering around in town, you'll find that you really feel cat's eyes or anything like that you go over with the front wheel. Or if you're trying to brake hard, the forks can lock out a bit too early, which can either get a juddering coming back through the bars at you, or even on occasion, lock the front wheel slightly. So, take out the screwdriver and take off 1/2 turn. And with the compression damping sorted out up at the front, you're left with a motorcycle that handles very well indeed, especially when you consider the size and weight of the thing. Really, the way you can chuck this bike around is much more like a smaller, nimbler sport bike would be than something like a Hayabusa, which really, by comparison, is a bit ungainly. This lets you get at the power, plenty of feedback, give it some welly, and make the most of what the motor has to offer, while still putting a big grin on your face. And talking of grins on your face, one thing that is not giving us a grin right now is this weather, these clouds, and the fact it's late and cold. So we're going to hand over to Louise, but we'll join you again later when we're back here tomorrow for top speed runs on the ZX12.
Now I'm sure all you hardened Ducati fans know that the Monster is the biggest selling bike in their range, and in their hometown of Italy, the little 600 outsells its bigger brother 900 by, well, twice as many, and it sits at number 4 in the sales chart. Now if you were a gold-digging big boss of a motorcycle manufacturer and saw booming sales figures across the world, wouldn't you want to get in on the act? Of course you would. Well, it certainly didn't take long for the Italian motorcycle industry kingpin, Mr. Castiglione, to sort out his act. After selling Ducati to American giants, he brought over the original Monster designer, Miguel Colucci, to Cagiva. And in a rather short time, he designed a fresh and rather wild-looking bike that took the naked theme quite a few steps forward. Now, after much development and testing, Cagiva decided to plump for the Suzuki engine over the Honda. In the big 1000cc Raptor, they've used the popular TL1000S. In this, the 650, they've used the SV650 engine from Suzuki. It's typically Japanese, it's smooth, it's direct, and it sits beautifully in this Italian chassis. Now, as for the gears, knock her easily down into first, and at that point you're once again reminded that the heart and lungs of this machine are not Italian. They bear the precision and smoothness of a Japanese sushi knife. And what a well-built chassis it certainly is, with this eye-catching trellis monster-like frame there. Up front we've got Brembo brakes, upside-down forks, and of course we've got twin cams there on the rear. Not bad, is it, for a small budget bike? And when it's time to grind to a halt, those 4-pot Brembo calipers grip the disc just fine with those twin 298mm discs up front. Now, I've always been a bit of a monster fan myself, and one of the reasons for that is because it's got such a low seat height, and I'm sure any of you shorter riders out there can relate to that. If you're under 5'6", you'll know it knocks your confidence a bit when you can't get your feet flat on the floor. Well, with this Cagiva Raptor, no problem. Got both feet planted firmly on the ground, which does your riding confidence the world of good when you pull up at the lights. Now, as for the riding position, it's ultra comfortable. It's kind of that sat up neutral kind of position with the straight handlebars, and some people find that not very exciting, especially if you're a hardened sports bike rider. In fact, I've heard it being resembled to us sitting on a bar stool, but this seat's ultra comfortable. I'm quite happy. I'll tell you another thing as well. Crack her up and she sounds a bit quieter than a monster. See what I mean? It's not quite got that growl of an Italian V-twin, has it? Might be a bit disappointing for some, but I'm quite happy with it. And the Raptor certainly has a very funky cyber space age feel look about it. The analog rev counter sits proudly above the digital speedo, and overall, well, the Italians have just got it right once again. Performance, I reckon the Raptor deserves a worthy 7 out of 10. It's quite happily tootling through the street. It won't shatter any shop windows with its awesome power, but get it out there on the open roads and it behaves rather nicely. It does as it's told, and it's quite happy to be flicked from one side to the other. Street cred, 9 out of 10. This bike has bags of personality in the looks department. I mean, it really turns heads, and let's face it, it's something different. It might look like a Ducati, but it's not, and people are going to want to know what it is and where it's from, and they're going to want to talk to you. Comfort, 9 out of 10. I'll tell you what, you could go for miles on this bike without even feeling a thing. The seat is well padded, it's a nice reach to the handlebars. The only problem is, of course, this very small screen at the front ain't going to keep much wind off you if you get it above 90 miles an hour. But then again, let's face it, it's a street bike and you're not going to be blasting down the motorway on it, are you? And as for value for money, I reckon 9 out of 10. It looks a lot of bike for the price tag that dangles from it, which is around 5 grand, about the same price as a Ducati Monster. If you're looking for the Suzuki SV650, that's priced a bit cheaper at about 4.5 grand, so the choice is yours. Do you want the trademark Ducati, or do you want to be a bit more individual and go for something a little different? Build quality, I reckon it deserves 8 out of 10. Now let's remember that this bike is essentially Italian, and they certainly know how to style and put things together. But they're not always the most reliable bikes in the world. But remember, the heart of this is Japanese, so it shouldn't let you down.
Welcome back to part 2, where you join us back here again at Bruntingthorpe, where very shortly we will be top speed testing this here ZX12, which should be a rather pleasant experience, largely thanks to that 1200cc motor in there. In essence, this motor is a peach. When the bike was first launched, it was slightly top-endy, which sounds like a strange thing to say for a motor so powerful, but to get at the real meat of the power, you really had to get the thing spinning. But for this year, it's a little more flexible, it's a little easier to use. You can even run top gear from as low as 20 miles an hour, all the way up to 190, which is nice. The throttle response is a little snatchy low down, but once you get going, you don't notice it. So all in all, very good. And when it comes to time to start stopping on your ZX12, you'll be pleased to find it's got a good set of anchors on it. Always very useful on 190 mile an hour motorcycles, I find. They've got plenty of feel, they've got plenty of power, those 6 spots there are really working and earning their keep. All in all, it's a good job well done. And as for the riding position, you'll be pleased to know there's plenty of comfort on board the ZX12, partly down to its size. It's really like a sports bike, just 20% bigger all over. So, particularly if you're a gangly git like me, you're going to find you've got a lot more room than you usually have. The spread to the bars and the stretch to the pegs is all fairly reasonable, if a little sporty. And the best bit about it is this bike has been designed for going incredibly quickly. So there is so much room for you to tuck into the bubble here, get out of the way, and should you be abroad or on a particularly long private stretch of road, you'll find going very fast, very comfortable. One thing you won't find, however, is a good pillion seat. Your pillions are not going to like you very long on one of these. Best kept to solo use only, I would say, or small hops. Well, it's time for the break now. Afterwards. Now we all know that superbikes are a lot quicker than supercars, but just how much quicker? Well, kindly enough, my friend Jake here has volunteered his Boxster S to be ritually humiliated by the mighty ZX12 here. And we're even going to do this scientifically with the help of Sean and Ian and their magical timing lights. So without any further ado, let's top speed. Ha! Rubbish.
That is fast. Right, he's lost us. We're doing 80. The rain is coming down hard. That's 100 and he's gone. We're doing 120 and he's out of sight.
Now this is one bike I've really been looking forward to riding. Yamaha's original TDM 850 was a great bike, but was largely overlooked in the showrooms as the punters stampeded past it to get to the multicoloured jixers and blades. But those in the know soon learned to appreciate the bike's fine handling and lusty big twin engine, and slowly the TDM began to gain cult status. Moto, the TDM exists in its own mini category in the Yamaha catalogue, alongside other difficult to classify bikes like the Phaser and VMAX. The space-age swoopy styling predates rivals like Suzuki's V-Strom, but still manages to look years in advance of anything else. But underneath the styling lies a big, solid motorcycle, capable of dealing with just about every task you could throw at it. At the heart of the beast lies this 897cc parallel twin 4-stroke engine, which now produces 85 brake horsepower and a stump-pulling 65 foot-pounds of torque. With fuel injection new for this year, the already big and lusty engine is now even bigger and lustier. With sports bike sales on the wane, the TDM's time has finally come, and Yamaha have chosen exactly the right moment to revamp the bike with this new all-aluminium beam frame and an increase in capacity to 900cc. It's a shame this bike's called a TDM, because tedious it ain't. The TDM is Yamaha's secret weapon that has finally come out of the closet, and it's turning into one of this year's surprise big sellers. If you can only afford one bike and you need to commute, have some backlane fun on Sunday mornings and pop down to the south of France for the weekend, check it out. It'll even be kind to your piggy bank. And at last the TDM has graduated to an alloy beam frame, both lighter and stronger than the original steel frame on the old 850. Brakes are from the R1 stable, which means the bike not only stops competently, but you can pull massive stoppies on it if you have the bottle. Big fat sticky tyres let you explore lean angles, and the suspension is fully adjustable for setup. On the road it's torquey and tractable. This new frame and suspension holds everything together admirably. The bike feels light and taut. At only 190 kilograms, the bike weighs substantially less than much of the opposition, and it can be flung around with flair if you want to go Sunday morning scratching. For comfort, well, none of your chin flat on the tank aches and pains here. This is a bike you can ride all day without requiring the attentions of a consultant chiropractor afterwards. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for comfort. Performance-wise, the TDM delivers more thrills per mile than you could reasonably expect for this kind of money. It's torquey in town, but wind it on and it picks up its heels with determination. Ride it with spirit and you'll find yourself capable of surprising a good few sports bike riders. And this year's model has the suspension and brakes to match. If crossing continents is your bag, the huge 20-litre fuel tank gives a usable range of almost 200 miles between fill-ups. In fact, there's very little that this bike can't do well. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for performance. Value for money now. Well, by my reckoning, the TDM has to be one of the best buys on the market at the moment. At only £6,799 on the road, it significantly undercuts much of the opposition. It may not have quite the poke of the V-Strom or the street presence of the R1150 GS, but it won't embarrass you in the company of either. There will be some depreciation, of course, but in terms of smiles per mile and bangs per buck, I reckon it's well worth a look. I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 for value. Build quality? Well, Yamaha have enough experience to know how to put their bikes together properly. The TDM uses a good, solid design that has had the bugs worked out of it over 3 generations of model changes, and it's engineered and assembled to the standards you'd expect. Paintwork and finish is good, and owners of older TDMs will be pleased to hear that the seat is no longer held on with Velcro. However, that shorty front mudguard will ensure a continuous salt spray onto the engine in the winter months, and regular cleaning will be required to keep the bike looking smart. Service it and clean it regularly, and the TDM won't let you down. 7 out of 10 for build quality. For street cred, 7 out of 10. The TDM is distinctive enough to stand out in the crowd and has a certain cult status to those in the know. Many see it as the smart option if you're not committed to owning a sports bike. It's great value for money and makes a stylish, practical and fun all-rounder. And that space-age styling is simply delicious and quite unique.
Performance, 9 out of 10. Good solid handling, nice and sharp, particularly given the size of this motorcycle, and more power and speed than can possibly be good for you. Only losing 1 mark for less than perfect throttle response. Comfort, 8 out of 10. She's better than your average sports bike, obviously not quite as good as a full-on tourer. That fairing's really protected, and when you're getting a move on, you're cocooned in this lovely still bubble of air. The only thing she's really going to lose marks for is that pillion seat, because it really ain't much top at all. Value for money, 9 out of 10. It's excellent. This much speed for this little money should be illegal. And it makes supercars look daft, as we've seen. Street cred, 9 out of 10. Look at it. The presence this thing has on the road is enormous. And as well as that, most people will know just how serious a piece of kit it is. Put simply, this is one of the fastest vehicles you can buy, period. How cool is that? Build quality, only 6 out of 10 here, I'm afraid. The finish is really pretty good, but where this bike does get let down is as the miles pile up, you will find things like the head bearings will often start to go loose. As well as that, the cush drive in the back wheel here isn't the best, which gives you quite a lot of lash in the transmission as the miles pile up. So you've got to keep on top of these to keep them feeling as sweet as they do from day one. Well, today has just been one of those awesome days. I'm still absolutely buzzing on it. I'm afraid, though, that is the end of this episode, but please join us again next week when we'll be back with much more excitement. In the meantime, I'm so happy I'm going to do a great big burnout. Yeah!